In this chapter, we're going to take a look at delegates and events. In the first lesson, we'll examine delegates, what these are, and how we make use of them. Specifically, we're going to look at what are delegates, how delegates tie in with method signatures, how do we declare delegates, how delegates store invocation lists, and how we invoke or trigger a delegate to cause a method to execute. First of all, we'll talk about what are delegates, the definition. Delegates allow us to hold on to a reference to an object instance and a method. So they are like function pointers in other languages such as C++. However, they are more powerful and safer to use. Essentially, the delegate is type safe. In other words, in other languages, you could be off by a couple of bytes the function pointer address and access an invalid area of memory, causing a runtime error. Can't do that with delegates. Delegates also more powerful because they allow you to work with static methods as well as instance methods, as we'll see a little bit later. So all in all, they're an improvement on function pointers you may have come across in other languages. Delegates are designed to work with methods. You could really think of delegates as a miniaturized version of an interface. That's one way to think about it. So allow, instead of several methods to be implemented and executed, say, I want just this thing to execute. So the purpose of the delegate is to store a reference to a method and, when requested by the program, to invoke or fire that method. You can think of this as a trigger that is primed and ready for action, but lies dormant unless and until called into action. It may never get called into action. So where might you use a delegate? You might use a delegate in an application where the user makes a determination by clicking on a radio button or a checkbox to carry out some action. May decide to change their mind and doesn't want that action to be carried out. So delegates are ideal for handling that. As we said earlier, since the delegate works with a method, it has to match the signature of the method. So delegates and methods have to be declared in a way that is compatible. Think of it this way. You can't stick a round peg in a square hole. So delegates have to be, so to speak, if I'm working with a round peg, I need a delegate that is round to accommodate that method. How do we declare a delegate? So here's a delegate that works with a method that takes no parameters. So we declare public, delegate void, sample delegate, open close parentheses. This will go with any method that has the same signature, public void test method. It won't work with a method that takes in an integer. So the last example, public void, another method, int x, is not compatible with the delegate declaration. You'll see this makes perfect sense when we try and invoke the delegate, because we pass the information into the delegate. So if there are different signatures, it's not going to work. An important point about delegates is under the covers within the framework itself, the delegate provides a mechanism called an invocation list, as shown in this diagram. So this invocation list, you can think of as a to-do list, says, oh, I need to execute method 1, method 2, method 3, so on and so forth, as many methods as are necessary. So a delegate can, in fact, encapsulate multiple requests. Multiple actions can happen when one delegate request is triggered. We mentioned that delegates have to match method signatures. Here's another example of this. So delegate declaration here is delegate void a simple delegate, and it matches this method, public void display info. How do I build an instance of my delegate? So you build a delegate instance just like any object, but specifically you hold on to a method reference. So the first part of this example, we've got an instance method. I've got a customer class, and I build an instance of a customer Acme Inc. equals new customer, and then a simple delegate prime the trigger. I deliberately call that prime the trigger equals new a simple delegate Acme Inc. dot display info. So I'm holding a reference to an instance method. I'm not invoking it. I'm simply telling the delegate to hang on to that reference. Static method, again with a simple delegate, I called it static prime the trigger deliberately equals customer.class level data. So I'm holding on to a static method. Delegate's quite happy to hold on to any type of object, static or instance, it doesn't care, as long as the method signature matches the delegate. How do you invoke the delegate? Delegate invocation is real simple. You simply call the delegate, passing in any arguments that it needs. In this case, we've got a very simple example, so there's no arguments passed in. But you can imagine if we're passing in a string data, we would then, in the parens, pass that data in. The delegate takes that data, that parameter, and passes it to the method, triggering the method to execute. So what we spent briefly looking at is the idea of delegates, delegates and method signatures, how we declare delegates, and the fact that delegates can hold on to a reference to either static or instance methods. We spoke a little bit about the invocation list and invoking a delegate. We'll see a demo in a few moments where you get a chance to see a complete, straightforward example of using delegates. We'll also go on and then look at how delegates are used in events in an upcoming lesson.